Hello, and welcome to History Bites. Today we are going to be talking about 5 of the most notorious pirates in history. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, was a notorious English pirate who operated in the Caribbean during the early 18th century. He was born in Bristol, England, around 1680 and began his career as a sailor in the Royal Navy. Teach later turned to piracy, and by 1717 he had become one of the most feared pirates in the Caribbean. He was known for his long black beard, which he would braid and tie with ribbons, and his habit of lighting fuses in his beard during battles to intimidate his enemies. Blackbeard's most famous ship was the Queen Anne's Revenge, a former French slave ship that he captured and outfitted with 40 guns. With his ship and crew, Blackbeard was able to capture numerous merchant ships and settlements along the eastern coast of the American colonies. One of Blackbeard's most audacious acts was his blockade of Charleston, South Carolina, in May 1718. He and his crew held several ships hostage and demanded a ransom from the city's officials. The blockade lasted for several days, but it ultimately ended with Blackbeard and his crew sailing away with the ransom. Despite his reputation as a ruthless pirate, Blackbeard was known for his ability to avoid violence when possible. He would often intimidate his enemies into surrendering without a fight, and he was known to be fair to his crew and to treat prisoners with relative kindness. Blackbeard's career as a pirate was cut short when he was killed in a battle with British naval forces off the coast of North Carolina in November 1718. His head was cut off and hung from the bowsprit of the British ship as a warning to other pirates. Today, Blackbeard is remembered as one of the most infamous pirates of all time. His legacy has been the subject of countless books, movies, and TV shows, and his image continues to captivate people's imaginations centuries after his death. Henry Morgan was a notorious Welsh privateer who became one of the most successful pirates of the Caribbean during the late 17th century. He was born in 1635 in Llanrumney, near Cardiff, Wales, and spent his early years as a farmer. However, he was said to have been unsatisfied with the farming life, and so he decided to seek his fortune at sea. Morgan first joined the British Navy, where he quickly rose through the ranks to become a captain. However, he was dismissed from the Navy in 1667 after an altercation with his superior officer. Following his dismissal, Morgan became a privateer and began attacking Spanish ships and settlements in the Caribbean. Morgan's most famous raid was the sacking of Panama City in 1671, which was then the richest city in the Americas. He led a force of 1,400 men and captured the city with relative ease. The loot from the raid was estimated to be worth around £300,000, which is equivalent to around £45 million today. Morgan was a shrewd and ruthless leader, and he was known for his strategic planning and cunning tactics. He was also notoriously brutal to his enemies, and he is said to have ordered his men to torture and kill Spanish prisoners. Despite his reputation as a pirate, Morgan was still able to gain the support of the British government. In 1674, he was appointed as the Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, which was then a British colony. He used his position to continue his privateering activities and to accumulate even more wealth. Morgan died in Jamaica in 1688 at the age of 53. His legacy as a pirate and privateer has been the subject of numerous books, movies, and TV shows. While he is often portrayed as a swashbuckling hero, his actions were often violent and brutal, and he was responsible for the deaths of countless innocent people. Thomas Tew, also known as the Rhode Island Pirate, was a famous pirate who operated in the Indian Ocean during the late 17th century. Tew was born in Newport, Rhode Island, in 1649 and began his career as a sailor. In 1692, Tew was hired by the British East India Company to command a ship called the Amity. However, Tew grew frustrated with the low pay and lack of opportunities for advancement, and he decided to turn to piracy instead. Tew sailed to Madagascar, where he formed a partnership with other pirates and established a base of operations. From there, he began raiding ships in the Indian Ocean, becoming one of the most successful pirates of his time. Chew's most famous raid was on a ship called the Fateh Muhammad, which was sailing under a license from the Mughal Empire. The Fateh Muhammad was carrying a treasure trove of gold, silver, and jewels, and Chew and his crew were able to capture the ship and its riches without firing a shot. Despite his success, Chew's career as a pirate was cut short when he was killed in a battle with a French ship in 1695. Chew's ship, the Amity, was severely damaged in the battle, and Chew and many of his crew members were killed. Today, Chew is remembered as one of the most successful and daring pirates of the golden age of piracy. His legacy has been the subject of numerous books and movies, and his story continues to captivate people's imaginations. Henry Every, also known as Long Ben, was a famous pirate who operated in the late 17th century. He was born in England in 1653 and began his career as a sailor in the Royal Navy. In 1694, Every was serving as a first mate on a slave ship called the Charles II when he led a mutiny against the captain and took over the ship. Every and his crew renamed the ship the Fancy and turned to piracy. The Fancy quickly became one of the most feared pirate ships of its time. Every and his crew attacked numerous ships in the Indian Ocean, including several owned by the powerful East India Company. In 1695, Every and his crew captured a ship called the Ganj-i-Sawai, which was carrying a vast amount of treasure, including gold, silver, and precious jewels. The capture of the Ganj-i-Sawai made Every and his crew incredibly rich and famous. However, it also made them the target of a massive manhunt by the British government and the East India Company. Every and his crew managed to evade capture and disappear with their loot. Every retired from piracy and lived the rest of his life as a wealthy man. He was never caught by the authorities, and his ultimate fate remains unknown. Every's career as a pirate was relatively short-lived, but he remains a legendary figure in the history of piracy. His daring exploits inspired countless other pirates and continue to capture people's imaginations to this day. William Kidd, also known as Captain Kidd, was a Scottish sailor who became a famous pirate during the late 17th century. Kidd was born in Greenock, Scotland, in 1645, and he began his career as a privateer, licensed by the British government to attack French ships during the 9 Years' War. In 1696, Kidd was given a commission by the British government to capture and prosecute pirates in the Indian Ocean. However, Kidd's expedition was plagued by problems from the start. His ship, the Adventure Galley, was slow and poorly equipped, and he struggled to find enough crew members to man the ship. Kidd's troubles only grew worse when he mistakenly attacked a British ship, the Quedar Merchant, in the Indian Ocean in 1698. The Quedar Merchant was actually a French ship that had been captured by pirates, and Kidd had believed it to be fair game. When he realized his mistake, Kidd let the ship go, but he had already made enemies of the French and British governments. Kidd's reputation as a pirate continued to grow, and he became the target of a manhunt by the British government. In 1699, Kidd was captured and brought back to England, where he was put on trial for piracy and murder. Kidd's trial was a highly publicized event, and he was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to death. He was hanged in London in May 1701, and his body was left to hang in a gibbet as a warning to other pirates. While Kidd's career as a pirate was relatively short-lived, his legacy has endured for centuries. He is often portrayed as a swashbuckling hero in popular culture, but his actual history was more complex and controversial. Nevertheless, Kidd remains a fascinating figure in the history of piracy, and his story continues to captivate people's imaginations. And that is all for today's History Bite. We hope it filled your appetite. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. See you next time.